Garda. Connect on Twitter at Ashraf Garda.
Right. By the way, your thoughts, your comments are welcome, and you can do that via WhatsApp voice note. That's probably the best way to do that. Where do you feel? Where is South Africa at 27? Where is South Africa at 27? I'll leave it to you. Maybe a good one-liner will help us on that. Right. Okay. So we've heard the voice of Professor Bonang Mohale. Let's get another voice on this issue. Where is South Africa at 27? Dr. Claudelle von Eck is with me. She's the founder of Brave Inflexions. Before that, the CEO of the Institute of Internal Auditors, South Africa. Claudelle, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, Ashraf, and thank you for having me, and good morning to your listeners.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I'm tasking you with this important job of maybe starting with one line to describe where is South Africa at 27.
I think we're a bit of a mixed bag, but I'd say wounded, stunted growth. And what I mean by that is we talk about freedom in South Africa, and the main focus has been on political freedom. There's been more of a shift on economic freedom. But the one that I'm most concerned about is freedom of the mind. And that is typically what is considered the softer issues, the psychological issues, which I feel is the more important one driving everything else, and not enough focus on that area for us. And therefore, I would say I would bring in the wounded and stunted growth.
So I want to stay with the freedom of the mind, because I've had a chat with other people earlier on, and they talk about unfreedom and freedom on mute and that sort of thing. So play out more importantly, why is the freedom of the mind that important? And in fact, do you and I and everybody else listening, do we have freedom of the mind?
I think the majority of us don't realize to what degree we're still not completely free in our minds. And the reason why it is so important is it tags directly into agency. And agency is what gives you the impetus to do what you need to do, right? So if we're talking about the South African economy, unless you are completely free in your mind and you understand what it is that you are able to bring to the economy, you will always be a step behind, right? So you become a follower. So we have a country where we should have so many more people who are leading. And I was listening to Bonang earlier on, I only got the last bit of what he was saying, but there's been typically a significant focus on jobs in South Africa as opposed to creating entrepreneurs. We can't expect the country to grow to where it needs to grow to if we have a significant part of society not seeing themselves as contributors or active contributors within the economy. And that is a mindset issue. And unless we free ourselves from that, we're not going to get to where we need to get to. Even when it comes to political freedom, only if you only see it in relation to I am able to vote and I'm able to help decide who the leader is going to be within the South African context, then it's a very narrow view. But if you start to see your role as a citizen within the landscape of South Africa and your agency within that, you then become a lot more involved in building a South Africa. And, you often use the terminology around champions, and that's the champions for South Africa. But that is a mindset thing. It requires a certain degree of moving away from what South Africa had created over time. And that is two polar sides, and you've got your continuum in between. On the one side, you have an inferiority complex, and on the other side, you have a superiority complex. And both those two are very harmful. So if your mind is caught up in that, in one of those two or somewhere within the continuum, you're not able to completely be part of a nation that is becoming a great nation.
So what therefore, I want to stay with the freedom of the mind thing, because it's just so important. because I mean, again, the critics will say, and I'm glad you've made the point about it. Freedom is not just about the right to vote, because I mean we all have that, but like, so what? But the more important one in terms of the freedom of the mind, I mean, how does one explain to someone in Alex who's got no running water and still toilets on the outside, etc., and you tell that person, well, you now have the freedom to say, I can be anything I want to be. It's rather hollow, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that is why you can't take it just in isolation, looking at one individual. One needs to look at the complete ecosystem. And this is why I talk about the two sides and the continuum in between. Because the one individual is very difficult for one individual who has absolutely no resources to rise up. Unless within the ecosystem we get that freedom of the mind, free from the complexes that were created by the previous system, so that we can start to understand how we affect each other. So if we talk about people who are sitting with economic power in the corporate space, for example, starting to have the conversation around, do you understand and see to which degree you are contributing to the inequality in South Africa? That is a shift in the mind. So a lot of people are still completely blocked off from seeing the full picture. And therefore, yes, absolutely, I agree with you in terms of the guy who has no resources to rise up. It does sound hollow if we can't get the ecosystem right. The reality is...
Yeah, and therefore, this brings me on to this important issue about the connectivity. Now, the World Health Organization, the chief there has always made the point about nobody's safe until everyone is safe with regard to COVID, right? I mean, to what degree have we internalized something along that line in terms of understanding South Africa? That means we can't have nobody's living a just life or social justice when others are not living a life of social justice. So that sense of, I speak about this often, when I win, South Africa wins. But to what degree, therefore, do we say, I need to ensure that I win for myself, but I win for every other citizen in my country?
Ashraf, I'm afraid that I think that the majority of South Africans don't really see themselves completely connected to the others and are able to see the ripple effect of their actions. And I think that there was a time when we understood it. So if you go back to African humanism, the term Ubuntu itself speaks about that. And if you look at quantum physics, that confirms that Ubuntu is completely correct as an ideology. But over time, we have become such an individualistic society. We've moved from collectivism to individualism. And that is, I think, to a large degree because we've had so much influence from the West. And the difficulty that we're sitting with now is to move South Africans back to that understanding. Because until we get to that understanding, I think we will remain fragmented and the inequality can't be addressed properly. Because you do need everybody in the ecosystem to do their part with a mind that is not completely sitting in a box.
And therefore, who needs to be doing what? I mean, what you do, I think in your space is formidable, and you're certainly getting us to be conscientized. But I mean, that's at one space. How do we mass market all the things you've just said?
Yeah, and this is where I think we need to start to talk more about why is it that we have so few leaders in South Africa that are silent? Because typically to get movement forward, and leadership is not necessarily about people sitting in positions that are in high positions, but we need to talk about the leaders at school level, in the various religious institutions. Why are we just having this very one-sided view? Why are we not having that conversation as leaders in South Africa in terms of how do we mobilize people and start to shift the way people think in South Africa? But you're going to need to start to get leaders in various spaces to shift their minds as well. And we can't underestimate, Ashraf, the degree to which the past has really hurt us, damaged us. And we have to have more conversations around how do we bring about that healing, because all of that is tied to the agency that leaders have to lead people.
Therefore, the last thing as we celebrate South Africa at 27, notwithstanding all the things you've already said, what's the one thing you want to see happen like ASAP?
I think the most important thing for me is that South Africans start to see who they are, because I think we really have a lot of potential in this country. If we can start to see that and we step into who we are, we truly are, I think we have a lot to offer the world. It's not just about getting South Africa where it needs to be, but also seeing our contribution to the rest of the world.
And let's leave it at that, because the who we are and who does just that maybe is a conversation, a deeper conversation we need to be having. Thank you for your time, Dr. Claudelle von Eck from Brave Inflexions, and some really important insights that you've shared that we need to certainly pick up on. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's another take on where is South Africa at 27. Still to come, we will chat to Dr. Pali Lehohla. We'll chat to Professor Jonathan Jansen as well. But next up, Professor Mamokgethi Phakeng, the Vice-Chancellor at UCT.
Looking